Fangs in the fog. The first night, it was the howling. I'd been sitting in my small rustic cabin deep in the woods, trying to get through the last chapter of some paperback thriller. The isolation was usually a comfort. I worked in the city, loud, crowded, chaotic, and the cabin offered me an escape, a sanctuary. But tonight, the stillness felt oppressive. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Midnight. The howling started faintly, distant but piercing, like a knife slicing through the silence. I froze, listening. It wasn't a normal howl. I'd heard coyotes before, high-pitched yips that echoed in the distance. This was different. It was deep, guttural, almost a human. I stood and went to the window, pulling back the curtain. Fog blanketed the forest in an eerie shroud, twisting around the trees like ghostly fingers. The moon hung low and pale, its light barely penetrating the haze. I couldn't see anything out there, but the howl came again, closer this time. A chill ran down my spine as I backed away from the window. Maybe it was just an animal, a big dog, lost and lonely. But there was something in the sound that didn't sit right. It wasn't just the pitch or tone. It was the feeling it left in my chest, a kind of primal dread that made my heart pound. The cabin's creaks and groans had been soothing before, but now they felt ominous, like the house itself was warning me. I double-checked the lock on the door and turned off the single lamp, plunging the room into darkness. My hands fumbled as I lit a candle, its flickering flame casting long, shifting shadows on the walls. That's when the scratching started. It was faint at first, like tree branches brushing against the wooden walls. But it grew louder, more insistent, until it was unmistakable. Something was at the door. I froze, my mind racing. A bear? A raccoon? My gut told me otherwise. The sound was too deliberate, too slow. It wasn't the frantic scrambling of an animal scavenging for food. It was measured, almost curious. "Who's there?" My voice came out shaky, barely louder than a whisper. The scratching stopped abruptly. My heart thudded in the silence. Then I saw them, two yellow eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, staring at me through the window. They were low to the ground, unblinking and unnervingly focused. For a moment, I thought it might be a stray dog. But as it stepped closer, the fog parting just enough to reveal its skeletal frame, I realized it wasn't any ordinary animal. Its fur was patchy and matted, clinging to its emaciated body in clumps. Foam dripped from its bared teeth, which gleamed unnaturally sharp in the moonlight. But it was the eyes that unnerved me most. They were too intelligent, filled with a malice that no normal creature should possess. I stumbled back from the window, my hands trembling. "Go on, get," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The creature didn't move. It just stared, its lips pulling back in a snarl that sent a wave of nausea through me. Its teeth were jagged, almost like they'd been broken and sharpened. My pulse thundered in my ears as I reached for the shotgun hanging above the fireplace. I hadn't fired it in years, but the weight of it felt solid in my hands. The scratching began again, louder this time, and from multiple places. The door rattled on its hinges as something heavy pressed against it. I realized with dawning horror that there was more than one. I fired a warning shot through the window, the sound deafening in the small space. When the smoke cleared, the eyes were gone, and the scratching stopped. For a moment, I thought it had worked. Then I heard a low growl, coming from inside the cabin. I turned slowly, dread twisting my stomach into knots. In the corner, where the candlelight barely reached, I saw it. The creature had somehow gotten in. Its body was even more grotesque up close, its ribs protruding, its skin riddled with festering sores. Blood dripped from its maw, though I couldn't tell if it was its own or someone else's. It moved suddenly, too fast for something so thin and weak-looking. I fired blindly, the recoil knocking me backward. The creature yelped and collapsed in a heap, but I didn't wait to see if it was dead. I bolted for the door, unlocking it with shaking hands and plunging into the night. The fog wrapped around me like a living thing, its cold tendrils seeping into my clothes and skin. I ran blindly, branches slapping against my face and tearing at my arms. The howling started again, but now it was everywhere, a chorus of unnatural voices closing in. I tripped over a root, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through my knee, but I scrambled to my feet, my hands scrabbling for the shotgun I'd dropped in the fall. I turned just in time to see one of the creatures emerging from the fog. This one was larger, its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. Its eyes glowed brighter, almost as if it were mocking me. I raised the gun, my finger trembling on the trigger. The beast lunged, and I fired, the blast tearing through its shoulder. It staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it let out a shriek that sounded almost human, a sound of pain, yes, but also fury. I ran again, my lungs burning, my vision blurring with tears. The howls followed me, growing louder, more frantic. They were toying with me, hurting me like prey. Finally, I stumbled into a clearing. Moonlight spilled through the trees, illuminating a figure standing in the center. At first I thought it might be another creature, but as I got closer I realized it was a man. He held a rifle, his face scarred and weathered, his eyes hard and unyielding. "Get down," he barked. I dropped to the ground as he fired, the crack of the rifle splitting the air. One of the creatures yelped and fell, its body convulsing, before going still. The man fired again, and another beast collapsed in the fog. When the howling finally stopped, the silence was deafening. The man helped me to my feet, his grip firm but not unkind. "Come on," he said. "They'll be back." We walked in silence for what felt like hours, the forest pressing in on us from all sides. Finally, we reached a small, fortified shack. Inside, the man lit a lantern, revealing walls lined with weapons and supplies. "What were those things?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me grimly, his expression shadowed. "Used to be dogs, rabid, at first, then something else." I didn't ask what he meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sent my heart racing. The man stayed awake too, his rifle resting across his lap, his eyes never leaving the window. The howling started again just before dawn. Low and mournful, it carried with it the promise of another long, bloody night. And I knew, deep down, that I'd never feel safe in the woods again,